That's everything from anarchist groups to racially motivated violent extremists. To confront these threats, we're working closely with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners and reaching out to all the communities we serve. And our efforts are paying off. We're being proactive, like in the case of the man, our Miami JTTF, arrested in August for threatening, among other things, to kill every Hispanic American in Miami. Or the Las Vegas man, our JTTF, arrested the same month, who'd been discussing a potential synagogue attack and had already purchased bomb-making materials. Or the man we arrested just this past Friday, who also planned to attack a synagogue, this one in Colorado, using pipe bombs and dynamite. But these cases...
As a special agent with OSI, we are charged with a mission to identify, exploit, and neutralize criminal, terrorist, and intelligence threats in multiple domains to the United States Air Force, United States Space Force, the Department of Defense, and the United States government. In its truest form, we investigate criminal activity as well as plots to commit criminal acts. We are not thought police, and we are committed to working within the bounds of the United States Constitution and the rights given to all Americans to the free speech and the right to assemble. Domestic extremism is not new within our borders. As Doc Morris indicated, we have seen a marked increase in DVE and HVEs in our country and within the borders of our world partners. To combat this threat, we in law enforcement proactively evaluate threats and their potential impact on our communities. OSI partners with law enforcement agencies like the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to share threat information on the tactics, techniques, and procedures of those groups intent on harm to our force, our country, and our way of life. The Department of Homeland Security assesses primary terrorist threat inside the U.S. to be lone offenders and small groups of individuals including DVEs and HVEs. As mentioned earlier, the world has seen a marked increase in targeted violence. Much of it is associated to extremist ideology. 2019 was the most lethal year for domestic violent extremism in the United States since the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. Violent extremists carried out over 20 attacks, killing over 50 people. Some U.S.-based violent extremists have capitalized on the increased social and political tensions in 2020, and we are likely to see this trend continue through early 2021. Violent extremists will continue to target individuals or institutions that represent symbols of their grievances, as well as the grievances based on political affiliation or perceived policy positions. Among DVEs, racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically white supremacist extremists, will remain the most persistent and lethal threat in the United States. Spikes in other DVE threats depend primarily on political or social issues. Since 2018, white supremacy extremists have conducted more lethal attacks in the United States than in any other DVE movement. They are responsible for conducting half of all lethal attacks, which resulted in the majority of deaths. Another motivating force behind domestic terrorism that also poses a threat to the country is anti-government or anti-authority violent extremism. These violent extremists, sometimes influenced by anarchist ideology, have been associated with multiple plots and attacks which include a significant uptick in violence against law enforcement and government symbols in 2020. This ideology is also exploited by hostile nation states, which seek to promote it through disinformation campaigns aimed at creating additional turmoil and discord across American society. Anti-government and/or anti-authority violent extremists are likely to be emboldened by a perceived success of exploiting otherwise peaceful protest movements and concealing violent tactics. Federal law enforcement intelligence indicates that DVE groups actively target prior and current military members because of advanced military training in the use of firearms, small group tactics, and other capabilities. While this makes current and former military members attractive to violent extremist groups, Just as important is the value these groups place on the commitment that military members make to selfless service to a cause such as protecting our country. Unfortunately, military members, past and present, can also be drawn to these groups seeking the same level of camaraderie once experienced in uniform. The use of social media and the internet to recruit and radicalize all but replaces the need to meet in person. While still a concern, the local threat picture is complicated by chat rooms and online groups focused on spreading violent extremist ideology. As Dr. Morris indicated, radicalization is a path taken, which can be interrupted and mitigated by intervention. Once identified, a multidisciplinary approach is the best practice to implement an action plan to prevent violence. Only through effective communication and collaboration can we set in place plans to address specific issue at hand. That starts with each of us. OSI and law enforcement in general investigate criminal activity. Unfortunately, this often means that an act of violence has already occurred. While a response to law enforcement may prevent future acts, it is not much comfort to those affected by the assault, the homicide, or other violent act. You are the best position to prevent violence by learning to recognize the signs early and then taking action to report your concerns. What we know from prior attacks is that people around an individual on the pathway to violence were aware and had suspicion and concerns. Unfortunately, not everyone took action because they were uncertain, confused, and torn between reporting what they saw and thinking that maybe they were wrong. The reality is that this is an incredibly complicated issue. We've all heard the phrase, see something, say something. There are things that you can do at many levels. For example, talk to your first sergeant, talk to your commander, or talk to law enforcement. The point is to take action. Comments about harming or killing someone, inflicting damage should be reported immediately. Discussions about purchasing illegal weapons, bringing weapons into the work environment, or storing them in prohibited places like an office or dormitory could be a warning behavior and must be reported. We, and I mean all of us, must take action to prevent violence. There are many reporting options available to you. Certainly, if there is an immediate threat, please call 911. Criminal allegations can be reported through your local security forces, local law enforcement, or directly to OSI. You may also report anonymously via our 24-hour watch line at 1-877-246-1453 or online using the URL of our webpage listed at the end of this presentation.
Our goal today was to help you understand what extremism is, what it looks like, and how it is possible for any of us to progress into extremism. Then we focused on learning the risk factors and warning behaviors for extremism in order to help you all identify when a friend, colleague, fellow airman, or fellow guardian may be vulnerable to the progression into extremism so that you can intervene, no matter if you're an E1 or an 06, before they get to the point where they are actually considering violence. The majority of airmen and guardians serve with honor and dignity, but there are some in our ranks who are currently falling prey to the violent world of extremism. It is up to the rest of us to identify the extremists within our own ranks so that we can prevent extremist-motivated targeted violence before it happens. Today was not about a reaction to one domestic violent extremist attack on our nation's capital. Today was about finally focusing on the bigger threat to our nation after a steady upward trend of violent attacks from domestic violent extremism over the last decade. The information you learn today can help you be the one that prevents the next attack. Thank you for your time and attention.